of institutions, individuals, families, and the nation at large. So that's the first tripod, the credible leadership, signaling that. And then the second one is usually the prevention tripod, arm of that tripod. The prevention leg of that tripod says that you need structural changes and institutional process, systems, all kinds of procedural changes that would enable transparency, that would lead to better informed ways of decision making and evidence-based approach to making choices, things that are accountable and transparent. So part of this is you make the budget process transparent. You build institutions of public procurement like the Bureau for Public Procurement. You establish institutions like the Office of the Accountant General, the Auditor General, the Public Accounts Committee effectiveness. All of these structural and institutional things are important. The structural and sectoral policy changes that include deregulating sectors that lend themselves to market principles so that you reduce the opportunity for corruption, essentially. That whole prevention strategy is toward that. And then the last leg of the tripod is the deterrence part of it. And that's that you have law and its enforcement. Your whole justice infrastructure would enable you to sanction corrupt behavior in a conclusive manner and in a manner that says that there is a cost for bad behavior and that when bad behavior happens, the society would not tolerate it, because any time that society tolerates bad behavior and rewards bad behavior in consonance with the law of supply and demand, whatever you pay for and for whatever there is a profit for will happen more. And so you have prevalence of corruption in societies where the cost of corruption is too low. So when you look at this in this comprehensive sense, you would then have to analyze by yourself where you think we fall.
Well, in all of this, I think I'm quite interested in the second tripod, which you say, well, is trying not to encourage people to get into all of that, maybe trying to tie up some of these loose ends. How can we do that, and what are we not doing right before we look at the deterrent measure, which is the very last? How can we do that, and what are we not doing right before we look at the deterrent measure, which is the very last?
You know, in terms of, the first tripod, which is a leadership that signals an intolerant stance toward corruption, I think that there's quite a long mile to go. I believe that within this society now, if you feel the pulse of the society, there is a sense that the whole theater of public governance is having a credibility crisis. I mean, the credibility crisis is so huge. The fact is that once you have served in government, it almost is an assumption that nobody serves in government without being corrupted. And so that shows to you that we do have a serious leadership crisis as far as the issue of conveying a very strong signal to society that we must be a society with a value construct that eschews corrupt behavior. So there's a long journey ahead of us in terms of that first tripod of leadership that leads and signals an intolerance toward corruption. In terms of the prevention strategy, where I talked about structural issues, the kinds of roles and responsibilities, and the division of labor in the management of economy, clearly, when you look at what has happened in the telecom sector, where the deregulation and liberalization reduced the kind of corruption that we faced in the telecom sector of this country, that's a plus. When you look at the existence of new institutions like the EFCC, the ICPC, the existence of the Bureau for Public Procurement, the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, and the agency and the laws that underpin all of these institutions, that's progress. These are evidence of, they constitute evidence of the fact that prevention activities were going on. Now, are they functioning at the level that they should? Of course, no, they are not. There's not even an optimal level of effectiveness in terms of the way that these institutions function. Take a typical case of Neiti. I keep saying to people that with Neiti properly implemented, we wouldn't have the kind of distrust of government in the petroleum sector that we currently have in this country. Everything about making that sector transparent, everything about making that sector accountable is within that law. Now, the spirit of the law, the intention of the law, the practice of the law completely are being done in the breach. And so it's important that we should assess ourselves in that regard. You said you would come to the deterrent side of it, and so I'll leave you to come up with that question.
You know, again, looking at the answer that you've given now, a host of people will say that it seems to come back to the debate between is it institutions we need first or is it political will that we need first? From what you've listed, it doesn't seem like we lack institutions. Are you saying then that we do not have the will? After all, we all cry that corruption is the bane of development in our country.
Am I still on? Okay, very good. You know, Maupe, they are not mutually exclusive. In an effective anti-corruption strategy would first and foremost require the political commitment of the strongest and the highest office of the land. And so normally it is said that the president or the prime minister, as the case may be, or the head of government in any kind of political system that is practiced, must be the leader on the issue of tackling corruption. Now, you know, political will is fundamental because you need to be able to make some of the difficult choices and take the difficult decisions. These are politically costly decisions that any leader must take if they are committed to fighting corruption. So that's fundamental. But you need the institutions. The sad thing that I sometimes hear is that people think that you simply legislate institutions into being and then they achieve the legitimacy to carry out their mandate. It doesn't happen like that. You know, institutions are process driven, and so it does take time. You can create an institution, the artificiality of having just an institution that then does not produce the results of its mandate. You know, it's very clear to citizens, and that's why some institutions may exist in countries, but they haven't made any dent in the tackling of corruption. So you need all of these working in unison. And the key thing, Maupe, is that it's not just about the leadership signaling to society. It's also about a society that gets to the point where it assesses the cost of corruption to its own potentials and says, you know, enough of this, because it's too costly. Corruption perverts everything about a society. Corruption simply means that you're not operating at a level of allocational efficiency of your resources to enable you get the kind of outcome that would improve the quality of life of everyone.
We're lost in a quagmire in the sense that they sometimes go back to our political history and say that it's because of our background, it's because of where we're coming from, our colonial history, and then moving into independence. Do you see any of that come into play in what we have currently?
I was one of the youngest co-founders of Transparency International in the early 90s, and I simply was aghast when the colleagues from the countries of the North will say that Africa suffers systemic corruption, endemic corruption, simply because it is cultural. And then they say, oh, you know, Africans culturally accept gifts, and therefore they are prone to, you know, crossing the border of what is appropriate behavior. And that used to make me so sad. And I would fight that kind of very slothful intellectualism. I would say to them that everything about African history says to us that